Hello and welcome to episode number 48 of the Hafey Digital Podcast, a show for creators, makers, and doers, where my goal is to help you make to the max. My name is Ryan Hafey, and in this episode, we're going to talk about why I may be in a little over my head when it comes to all this FPV drone stuff. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. If you are new to the podcast, be sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you happen to be watching or listening, because you're going to enjoy it. You are. And follow me on social media at Ryan Hafey on Instagram and Twitter, and let's have a conversation once this is all said and done. And by the way, if you happen to be new here, this is a podcast that I host every week on Sundays. We talk about photography, video, camera tricks, editing, and now apparently FPV stuff. So if any of that interests you, I kind of document my process here and my progress through those things each week. So feel free to tag along if you have any, tips and tricks to help me along in my journey. By all means, leave comments and let me know. But also, I hope that you walk away with some valuable knowledge that I've gained over the years of doing this. So anyway, before we get into the main topic for today, I just want to touch on one thing for all the boxing fans out there. As you know, if you've listened to this podcast for a little while, you know that I work in boxing by day. And last night we had a pay-per-view on Showtime. It was Gervonta Davis, Leo Santa Cruz in the main event. Man, that was it lived up to the hype. If it was worth the money for sure. First of all, I just have to talk about this a little bit because it was a crazy night of fights. First of all, we had 4 fights in the pay-per-view. All 4 fights ended in knockouts. So if that's what you were looking for, you got your money's worth there. But then cut to the main event. I think a lot of people counted Leo Santa Cruz out early. They didn't give him much of a chance. But man, Leo was in that fight for as long as it lasted. I think he pushed Davis to a limit that he hadn't experienced yet. And I thought Leo Santa Cruz did a really good job up until the 6th round when Davis was able to kind of get him up against the ropes. And, Leo's sort of leaning on the ropes and trying to throw punches and, just sort of trying to keep Davis away from him. Davis knew he wasn't going to have a ton of power behind those punches being on the ropes, was able to kind of figure him out. Leo threw 3 right hands in a row, which was enough information for Davis to be like, okay, I can time this now. So after he threw that 3rd right hand, Davis just sort of slipped to the left, threw just a nasty left uppercut, clean on the chin, knocked Santa Cruz out cold. Felt bad for Santa Cruz. Great guy, great fighter. But man, Davis, you can't knock him. Kid's got power, kid's got skill. So if you didn't get a chance to see it, I can't show the video of the knockout here, but if you go to the Premier Boxing Champions Instagram page or any Showtime social media pages, you'll see a clip of the knockout. In fact, I put a link to the knockout clip in the description if you want to go check it out. Please do. It's incredible. I had to talk on that. By the way, just want to mention too, I'm home alone at the moment, and which means I have dog duty. So in this room with me right now, I have 2 of my 3 dogs, and they're both on the floor. So if during this podcast you hear dog noises and barking and scratching and things like that, that's what you're hearing. So anyway, okay. We got a lot to talk about when it comes to this FPV stuff. Let me wet the whistle a little bit there. So as you may have seen in the thumbnail, this is my new Cinewhoop drone. This is the drone I talked about that I was getting last week, and this is its current condition. How did we get here? Well, let's discuss that. So, first things first, again, just to reiterate, I'm completely new to this FPV stuff. The extent of my FPV journey really begins and ends with a couple weeks worth of training with this little palm-sized Cinewhoop drone that I bought from Beta FPV, which I've been having tons of fun with. It's great for just kind of flying around indoors. But again, as I've said, the goal is to ultimately be able to upgrade to a Cinewhoop style drone where I can put a GoPro on it and get some nice, silky, cinematic FPV style footage. So me being the kind of person that I am where, you know, it's pretty much 0 to 100 for me very quickly, I decided, okay, I've flown this little FPV drone for a while now. I feel comfortable flying it around the house. I'm just going to go full throttle, pun intended, I guess, and upgrade to a full-size Cinewhoop and get started. Actually take something outside, start practicing with it, and really get things moving. So through some research, found that the Diatone Taycan drone is one of the more popular ones and one of the more reliable ones. So that's what I ordered, and I ordered it with the FPV digital system. So again, as I mentioned, not to get back into it completely, but you have digital and you have analog. Analog's kind of like the tried and true method, but the range as far as being able to, you know, get a signal from the drone back to the goggles isn't as far and not as quite as reliable, but the latency is really low. It's also a little bit cheaper to go analog. I decided to go the digital route, which is the DJI system. So these are the goggles. It makes you look kind of like a superhero, I guess, when you wear them. And then the DJI radio. Now, the DJI system does introduce a little bit more latency to your feed from what I've read, and it's a little bit more expensive, but you're going to get a little bit longer range, and you're going to be able to see more clearly where you're flying, and you know, it might give you the ability to maybe explore some places that you might not be able to explore on an analog signal. So that's what I went with, and I got all the parts in this past Friday. Now, when I first opened the box, okay, there we go. So this was the box that the drone unit came in. Obviously, there were multiple boxes because I had to get the goggles, I had to get the radio, batteries. What else did I get? Just little accessories and things like that. But so it came in this. Not everything that's currently in this box is what I received. But not everything in this box currently is what came in this box. Just like this is the manual for the little charger that I got. But it came with all of these little connectors and little pieces. And initially, I was overwhelmed. Got some extra props here, got some straps, got even more little connectors. So, you know, me being completely new to this whole world, I was a little bit overwhelmed at first because I thought, oh, okay, so there's going to be some assembly that's required here. I was under the impression that all the things that came in there I had to somehow install on this unit in order to be up and running. Apparently that's not the case. A lot of those are just for, you know, if I wanted to put additional accessories on it, like additional cameras or beepers or LEDs or anything like that attached to this. Diatone is nice enough to give you all the cables that you need in order to be able to do that. But in order to be up and running, you don't need all that stuff. So really, all I had to do was, you know, I had to activate the goggles and the radio through DJI. They have like a DJI Assistant app that you have to download. After that, then I also had to activate the drone itself using the same program. Then you had to bind the goggles and the radio to the drone, and then in theory, you were ready to go. Now, I figured that out early and was able to get the thing turned on. I was able to actually turn on the drone and do some small test flights. I've spent more time than I'd like to admit on this thing, and I've only had it since Friday. So I'm trying to remember exactly the order of things and how it all went down. But anyway, I did a few test flights. I recorded a couple of them through the goggles, but I guess I didn't feel they were useful enough, so I ended up formatting the card a couple times, and I don't actually have any footage of those test flights, but it's okay because they were pretty bad. But I did a little test flight here in this room just to make sure I can get it off the floor, which I could. Took it out in the backyard, was able to fly it around for a little bit in the backyard, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to go up the street and go to a park where there's some more room, and I'm going to take it up for an actual flight. So I go up to this park, get everything connected, turned on, send the drone up in the air, fly it around a little bit, and for a little while it's doing okay, and I'm hanging in there. I'm terrified because it's the first time I'm flying an FPV drone outside. And then at a certain point, the connection goes away, and then I luckily the drone wasn't too far from me, which is also perplexing as to why it cut out. But the feed went away, and then I freak out, open the goggles, and luckily the drone had landed safely on the ground not far from me. And then after that, I tried to turn it back on and fly it again, and for whatever reason, it just wouldn't go. I changed the battery out of it. I couldn't get it to bind again. I couldn't arm the drone. So I went home, started doing some research, and then that led me to the next issue that I had, which was an issue with the batteries. Again, a lot of the issues that I'm experiencing now could have been avoided had I taken the time to do some actual research on this. But again, it's just not the kind of person I do. A lot of people, as I've mentioned before, will suggest that you build a drone from scratch so that you know how everything works together. You know how the parts go together. If something breaks down, you know how to fix it. And maybe I should have gone that route, but I just didn't. So anyway, the next issue that I ran into was regarding the batteries. What I didn't realize, actually two things with the batteries. First, what I didn't realize is that with these batteries, let me grab one here. Come on. Nope, wrong one. Wrong one. There we go. So this is what the battery looks like that goes on this drone. It's a 4-cell battery, 1300 milliamps, all this stuff. You can't charge these like you would just any random charger. You have to buy a specific charger that can charge batteries based on their how many cells they have and voltage and wattage and all that kind of stuff. Well, so I purchased this, which is kind of like a smart charger, but even in order to operate this, there is a bit of a learning curve because you have to understand, you have to be able to calculate how to charge the batteries. All right, fair enough. Did a little research, figured it out, was charging batteries. What I didn't realize is that you're supposed to charge these balanced. You can charge balance and unbalanced. And I'm sure I'm messing some of this up. But some of this stuff can be balanced, some is not balanced. Or no, I'm sorry. These you have to charge balanced because there's 4 cells and each cell has to be charged equally. Otherwise, one might be overloaded than the other, whatever. But I was plugging this directly into the battery charger and it was charging them, but I guess is not the correct way you do it. So as a result of that, I had to buy this separate little board that plugs into the balancing port on the charger. Yeah, I think that's how it goes, so that I can charge these balanced. But what I also didn't know, and this brings me to the second issue, is that if you over drain these, meaning if you fly these so much that you just completely drain them of all of their juice, sometimes they won't charge up again, and because the voltage is too low. So there's like a hack that you can do to recharge it, but I had to buy a little balancing board so that I can charge these balanced. So I'm waiting for that to come in, and then hopefully this new hack, which basically involves charging these, because you can choose which type of battery you're charging in this. There's like the LiPo batteries, which is what these are. There's a few other kinds, and then there's like a nickel something, and the hack is to charge it that way with low amperage to kind of get the volts back up on this, and then switch over to LiPo to finish recharging. But I have not one, but 2 of these batteries that I've drained and that will not charge. So now I've got to wait for that battery board to come in so I can resolve that. So that's the battery issue. Luckily, I still have a couple batteries that I can use in the meantime. But that's the battery issue. So then moving on from that, what else? Yeah, so I had the random shutdowns. So figured out the battery issue, and then then I learned about Betaflight. So Betaflight is kind of like the program you can use. I think there's a couple different versions of it, but Betaflight is the one that I used, where you essentially connect your drone to your computer, and then you can pull up this Betaflight program. You can calibrate things. You can change certain settings, like on the remote. You have these little switches on the remote on the radio here, and depending on how you set these will perform different things. So like, for example, I have this switch set to be my arm disarm switch. So assuming everything's connected and working correctly, if I flip this up, then the drone will be armed, the propellers will start spinning, and then I can take off. There's other things like switching flight modes, just various things that you can set it to depending on your particular preferences. Where was I going with this? I don't remember. Oh, yeah, Betaflight. So what I didn't realize is that there's a lot of things you can do within Betaflight to kind of test and tweak things. And of course, I didn't realize this stuff until I'd already tried doing a couple test runs. I was having issues getting it connected to Betaflight, at least I was having issues getting it to connect consistently. It would connect, and then there would be periods of time where it wouldn't connect. And then there would be times when, because you can also, if you turn on the radio, you're supposed to be able to kind of tune the radio via Betaflight, but for a while that wasn't working. Then I finally got that to work, but I spent so much time on that, going back and forth. Finally, I got it in there. Finally, I tweaked some settings the way I wanted, unplugged everything, put on the goggles, turned on the radio, turned on the drone. It was armed. It was ready to go. I was happy. I'm like, okay, let's go in the backyard real quick. We'll do another just little close range test run, just to make sure everything's working. Get it armed, turn it on, get it in the air, and one of the motors starts burning, like starts smoking. It's this, it was this rear motor here. I don't know why it was doing that. The only thing I can think of is, God, this is such a mess. So if you look, I don't know, you're probably not gonna be able to see this, but let's try anyway. So here's, oh God, here's a healthy motor. On the bottom, you can see there's this little plastic piece. I don't know if it's some kind of like heat guard, but there's this little plastic piece underneath there. Under here, you can kind of see how it's missing there. And it's not that it's missing, it's just that it like melted. Somehow the plastic, guess, got into the coils and burnt up and was smoking. And now this motor does not turn freely like it's supposed to. So what that means is that now I had to buy a new motor, and I get to figure out how to solder. And the reason I have to figure out how to solder is because, let's go here again. These motors connect to the flight control unit, which is this, via these ports, and these are all soldered in. So because I burnt this motor up, I have to replace it. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to disconnect it from here, reconnect it, and then reassemble this whole thing, which, I mean, could potentially be a nightmare. So I'm a little bummed. I'm going to have to, I don't know. I'm a little bit bummed, and I'm going to have to figure out, I'm going to have to do some backtracking, but ultimately, you know, I mean, I'm trying to look at this positively. I think that ultimately this will be a good thing because I'm getting a better handle on how all of this stuff works and how it goes together. Like, I'm already kind of learning, like, this is the DJI Air unit, connects here to the camera, which is what's the view you're seeing when you're wearing the goggles and flying around. You've got a flight controller. You've got this other thing that I forget what it does. But again, I'm still learning. So let's see. Man, 841 drop frames at this point. I don't know I wonder what that's all about. Oh well. So yeah, I think what it came down to for me was, this Betaflight drone that I fly around, it's so easy to use. You literally turn on the headphones or turn on the goggles, turn on the radio, plug the battery in the drone, and then you hit this little bind button on the back of the radio, and then you're up and running and ready to fly. I mean, a couple other initial setup things, like you got to find the right signal for the goggles and stuff like that. But as far as subsequent flights go, it's like a one-time setup thing, and you're up and running. I was naively anticipating the same for this, and that clearly was not the case. So I'm having to do some backtracking, and I'm not happy about it. But man, it is what it is. So I don't know. I guess this is an open call to the FPV community out there, because one of the other things I noticed is that I am having a hard time finding some quality resources. There's a couple YouTube videos out there I watched, but a lot of them sort of explain things from the perspective of someone who at least has kind of a working knowledge of some kind of FPV. So there are, again, I'm completely new to this. So when I'm watching these videos and they're talking about certain things, or they gloss over certain things, I'm like, wait, slow down. What is this? So I'm having to do all these different searches to try to piece everything together. So far I've had to research batteries. How do you properly charge batteries? What do you do when batteries are burnt out? Or when they're completely drained? Motors. Why aren't the motors working correctly? How do I replace motors? How do I solder? I'm gonna have to learn how to solder now. I got to go buy a soldering iron. And then, outside of that, what are the optimal settings for motors? Like there's different people would talk about, there's different ways to tweak, like how the drone reacts to certain commands, or how certain ways that the sticks are moved on the radio. And I don't know what any of those mean. And all the videos that are like, okay, this is a full setup for this and that. This is what I set my values to, and then they would move on. It's like, well, why did you set your value like that? What does it mean? That's the kind of information that I'm looking for that I'm not getting, and it's making it difficult. So if anyone who's out there right now, if you're watching this and you have any sort of knowledge about FPV, let me know where I should go to kind of get a better understanding of this, or better yet, let's hop on a Zoom call, and maybe you can even walk me through how to set this thing up and to get everything set and up and running correctly, so I don't mess it up. Because what I'm terrified about now is that I'll get the new motor in, I'll replace it, I'll figure out how to do it safely and correctly, I'll get everything back together, and then I'll start it up and the thing just won't work correctly. Another thing that they don't really tell you in the beginning is that, like, the propellers, two of them, like by default, let's say you have the drone in front of you. I can't even use this as an example because it's all in shambles. But if you have the drone in front of you, the camera is facing away from you, the motor that's closest to you on the right side and the motor opposite of that on the front left spin clockwise, and then the other two spin counterclockwise. And you have to make sure that you put the propellers on the drone correctly, otherwise it's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to kind of, flutter around on the ground. Even speaking of which, I also had of these new, so that was another thing too. So I bought these propellers. These are 5-blade propellers. These were actually a suggestion from the Get FPV guy. The drone, or the propellers that came with the drone, were 3-blade propellers. And I don't know if that had an impact or if I was supposed to do any tweaking before I flew. But just like, if you have a car and you put new, like, bigger tires or anything like that, you have to kind of calibrate that and make sure that the car has enough torque. I don't know anything about cars. I'm just making all this up as I go, but it sounds right. You just got to make sure it's got enough torque to handle these new size wheels. I would imagine the same thing is going on with these propellers, but I didn't think about that. So I actually, in one of the first test flights, I was in the backyard. I get it going and it starts to pick up off the ground, and then I hear, and then I look, and apparently this is spinning so fast that the one of the blades just shattered or just broke off right at the center there and went flying somewhere. And I never found it. But I will say, this FPV system is really freaking cool. Like, you know, I'm not gonna lie, it looks great. It's definitely much better looking as far as the video is concerned than the Beta FPV or just like any analog signal. Fits pretty nicely on the head, although like if you're trying to kind of lift it up and, you know, if you're wearing it and you want to sort of put it up on your forehead, it is a little uncomfortable. There's, you know, whatever it is in here sort of pushes against the forehead and it's a little annoying, but other than that, it's fine. You've got these these lenses in here, and you can move them depending on how far apart your pupils are and to kind of get better focus. One of the things that's kind of annoying, and I think it's just how FPV works, is that there's no internal battery on this. So if I want to activate these, I have to be using a battery that looks similar to the drone battery, but it has to be connected to a wire or a power cable that's connected here as an external power source. So you essentially have to have a cable running from this to a battery in order for these to operate. But I guess that's just kind of how it goes. Over here, you've got a micro SD card, so you can record your flights if you want. USB-C port for stuff, I think updating firmware, things like that. A little up and down navigation buttons on the side there. Over here, you got a little joystick so you can go through the menu, little back button, record button. These are your antenna. But yeah, when you're wearing it on your head, it feels pretty nice. That said, I have nothing to compare it to. And then the radio here. It's bigger than I thought it was going to be. I mean, like it feels, because I want to be able to fly like this. I've tried flying like this, and I worry about just my fingers slipping off the sticks. So at least with this, I've got a little bit of extra sort of control over it. So that's how I've been flying. It's just a little bit difficult to get my hands around and, be able to grab the sticks correctly. But you got power button, different switches, dials, record button there. These connect pretty well with the goggles, so you can, I believe you can navigate through the menu in the goggles with this as well if you wanted to. And then you got a little strap so you can wear this around your head, because this thing is kind of heavy, and if you had to wear this for a while, it might be a little cumbersome. But yeah, that's been my FPV journey so far. And yeah, there's probably I'm sure there's some people out there just laughing at me and calling me an idiot because I didn't take the time to actually thoroughly do any research, but that's where we're at. So anyway, that's my FPV journey. I'm hoping that by next week, let's see, I should get my new motors within probably mid next week, I would imagine. So maybe by the end of next week and before the next podcast, I can have the new motors put on and maybe have the thing reassembled. I just hope to God that I can figure out how to reassemble this thing, because I mean, look at this. It's just a mess. And by the way, this is not all the parts. I have a little table over there that's got all the different screws, and it's, there's another bracket that goes on top. So there's pieces of this thing kind of all over the place. Yeah. So pray for me. But anyway, again, if you fly FPV, if you know anything about FPV, it would be greatly appreciated if you could help me out here, hold my hand, send me some resources that I can go check out that can kind of get me started with this. Because I'm kind of at a loss of really where to begin and where to go from here. But I want to be up and running soon. And when I have things like this, like projects that are sort of they're not resolved, that's when I get stressed out. That's when I get frustrated. I'm the kind of guy who will sit there and troubleshoot a task for as long as it takes until it's done. But this is, I obviously can't do that here. But so yeah, any help is appreciated. But if you are still with me and you've sat through and listened to my pain and suffering here, it would be great if you could hit that subscribe button wherever you happen to be watching or listening. And be sure to follow me on social media at Ryan Hafey on Instagram and Twitter. And let's have a chat after this is all said and done. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and call this one done. So thank you for watching. Keep on making, creating, and doing. And we will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.